Okay, here we go. Editing part 3. Okay, finding an editor for your book. I talked about getting your 5 to 10 beta readers. That's the beginning of the editing process. And then I talked about some discount or budget editing, discount or budget editing tools, resources you have online like Fiverr or BookBaby. Okay. These can be great resources for that self-published independent author who has an extremely tight budget. But like I said before, editing is one of those areas where I believe you need to be willing to spend money. This is the area where I'm willing to spend money, okay? And so I found through a publishing company, through an imprint, I found a person, his name is Graham Schofield. He is a professional editor, and this is what he does. This is his main job. He's published a couple books himself, but his main job is as a book content editor. He charges me per hour, and because I've used him so much, obviously, and this is one of the really nice things about finding an individual who does editing and creating a relationship with them, is he's done so much editing for me that, you know, now he doesn't necessarily charge me as much as he might charge a first-time author, because he knows that I'm going to continue to use him because he does great work. Here's the big advantage behind finding someone who is a professional editor. This is what their job is. They're probably charging more money. The biggest advantage is the relationship you're going to build. Okay, as you write more books, they know where you're going. You've had conversations over the phone, through Zoom, in person, whatever they may be. You've had conversations about, you know, what's in your head, what's in your imagination, where are these characters going, what are they doing, right? These professional editors have a ton of tools. Here are things that they have suggested to other authors to make them successful. This is what you need to do. So you really do create this relationship. And because inevitably they're putting a ton of time into your book, if they don't feel like you are upholding your end of the bargain, meaning you're not doing the groundwork that they want you to do in order to make your story work, and I appreciate this, they'll fire you, right? They're not just going to take your money, because, you know, it's like, it would be like going to a job that you hate. If you're self-employed, why would you go to a job you hate? So, you know, it's that relationship building piece that I think is so important when it comes to editing services. And that's what I built with Graham. You know, I would consider us friends. Sometimes we message each other back and forth, talk about our family, about things that have nothing to do with writing. And that's super important. Graham also knows what I'm thinking. He knows where my characters are going. And because of that relationship, like any other friend, you know, he can sometimes be brutally honest, and that's okay. Which, you know, you may not get from some of those discounted services, just because you don't necessarily know who your editor is. You know, you're not paying a ton of money. They're not fully invested into what you're doing. A lot of professional editors, the other thing you're going to find is they may be working on 2 projects at one time. Normally they're working on 1 project at a time. Okay. So that's the other thing with finding kind of a one-on-one professional editor, is budget time also, right? If they're locked up for the next 2 weeks, it is what it is. They are not going to start your manuscript until the next 2 weeks. Now, here's what I really appreciate about the editing process, especially when you find a one-on-one professional editor. What I really like is, you know, generally speaking, what they're going to do is they're going to do kind of the same thing that your beta readers did. Now, this should be your kind of finalized manuscript. They're going to do a once over, a general read, and give you some general feedback, okay? You go back, make those changes within your story. Again, oftentimes they're very, you know, very like cameras way up here looking at the general overall big picture of the story. This is not line by line content editing. Okay. Once you make those changes, once you make some adjustments, once you're ready to go, that professional editor is then going to do line by line content editing. Now, this is not copy editing. They're not going through and checking periods. They're not checking commas. They're not checking spelling. For the most part, if something's super glaring, they'll normally say something. They are checking on content. Does this idea make sense? Is this cohesive with this scene later on in the book? If you've written multiple books, and again, this is why this relationship is so important. is this cohesive with something you said in book one? One of the things I love about Graham is there are things that I'll write and he's like, wait a minute, back in book one you said this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember that, but he does. Okay, because he's got notes, he's got everything about my story. And it's not that I don't have those notes, but you start writing and you don't even think about it. You don't go back and check your own notes, but that's what the editor is there to do. Okay, and that's super important, because you don't want a reader reading book 6, book 7, book 8, and all of a sudden something happened that doesn't make sense because of something read in book 1, or a character pops up that died in book 1, and then you got to work through that, and that can be super damaging to your readership. So that relationship, that one-on-one relationship you get from your professional editor is so incredibly important. And again, the other thing that I find with those professional editors, with what I certainly get with Graham, is he is now more than willing, and I so appreciate it, he's more than willing to give me suggestions. You're not going to get that from a discount editor, okay? You're not going to get someone, hey, I know you said your main character, my main protagonist is Eric. I know you said this about Eric and you want him to go here, but have you thought about this? What about this, right? And they start to throw out ideas that really enhance your writing, and they can enhance your story. They're invested into your story. You're paying them good money, and they become a part of your story. They become invested in your story, and they become almost as important as you as an author. Now, what can editing services cost? Well, you can expect to spend anywhere between $25 to $35 an hour. Sometimes, depending on the editor, maybe I've heard people spending even $50 an hour on editing services. Okay, now, for someone who is an avid reader who beta reads, maybe they get through your book in a day. They sit down, they spend 4 or 5 hours reading through your first draft, and so you think, $250, that's not too bad. Or maybe it takes them 10 hours or $500. That's not too bad. No. You got to remember, a content editor, a professional content editor, is going to spend a lot of time on this. Okay, so I would say bare minimum 20 to 40 hours. Okay, so 20 to 40 hours at $25 an hour, which is a low ball, you're looking at $1,000. Okay, if your book is bigger, if your book is more intense, if it's more complex, if it's got, if you're writing fantasy and you've got made up people, made up names, made up races, made up worlds, it's going to take them longer. So you could see where you could easily spend somewhere in the $2,000 to even $3,000 range for professional editing. Okay. Now, the thing that I would encourage you to avoid as you look for a professional editor, and before I move on, let me tell you that it is well worth the money. Well worth the money. Okay. Again, you might be saying it's going to take me a long time to make this back. I get it. There's a lot of different ways you can look. You can do some crowdfunding type stuff to raise money for editing, whatever the case may be. Find an editor that is willing to allow you to make payments along the way as they do their editing, whatever it is. But in my opinion, it is well worth the money. The thing that I'm going to encourage you to avoid is editors that are charging you a certain price per word. Okay, that can get super pricey. And in my experience, I'm not, as a business model, it's not a terrible idea from an editor standpoint, but if they're charging you per word, they're a voracious reader. I just think it gives an opportunity for not being as thorough. Okay, so when Graham told me that he charges by the hour, he kind of gives a general overall, here's what I'm thinking this whole manuscript, this whole project's going to cost. I really appreciated that. It gave me a general idea. I know how fast he is. I know what the general cost is going to be. And so that is my suggested route that you would go when it comes to looking for editing services. So again, you got 3 different levels of editing. You've got your beta readers, which cannot be the end of your editing process. You've got some discounted editors out there, guys. You can find on Fiverr. services like BookBaby, and then you have your professional editors, which are going to cost over $1,000 at least. And you know, again, I believe you get what you pay for. Content editing, in my opinion, is more important than the book cover, because if someone opens up the book and it's garbage and it doesn't match up and it's not cohesive and it contradicts itself over and over again, you're going to lose readers, and they're going to give you bad reviews. They're going to tell their friends not to buy your book. If you have a book cover that's kind of sort of engaging, but your content is amazing, in my opinion, that's a win. Now, that being said, we got to get people to buy your book, right? And that's why book covers are so important. But in my opinion, the money that you should spend needs to be in the realm of editing. Okay, find a great editor with a great track record like I have with Graham, and it will make your life so much easier, and it will make your story that much better. My last video in this series, I'm actually going to talk about, and it'll be a much shorter video, I'm going to talk about copy editing, because what we're talking about right now is content editing, right? These are not the commas and the semicolons and you know, the sentence structure and things like that. Okay, and again, as you can tell from hopefully by now, I'm not a big fan of DIY content editing. Okay, so until next time, happy reading. I've linked up Graham's contact info in the description. So if you are looking for a professional editor, you can always reach out to him. He's amazing. But you know, you can also do a general Fiverr search or something like that. Look for professional editors. All right, until next time, happy reading.